All right. So as everyone heads back to their seats, we are past the halfway point, and we have our interactive panel. I'll introduce Susan here in a moment, but we will have, again, interactive. We're going to have audience Q&A as this goes on. We're going to do this for about an hour and a half, after which we will start our drawing and then the cocktail happy hour situation back there. So I think we're good enough at this point. So it's my pleasure to introduce, I don't want to stand in front of you while I do it. It is my pleasure to introduce Susan Lowry. She is the owner and president of Square One Consulting, and she's been a 20-year member of the University of Akron College of Business board member. So it is my pleasure to introduce Susan, and she will introduce the rest of the panelists. Let's hear a round of applause, please.
So we are obviously the last thing standing between you and cocktail hour. However, I think you will be excited because we've assembled a panel of folks here today that have been very involved in analytics and AI and actually have some real world experience and some fun stories to tell. And who knows what's going to be set up here on the panel. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about who they are, where they're from, and where they are in their AI journey. And I'm going to start here with Matt.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Gibson. I am a managing partner and founder of Comet Consulting. Our organization helps companies in the mid-market and enterprise space, traditionally in healthcare, retail, and manufacturing verticals, deploy Microsoft solutions. So been doing Microsoft-specific consulting for the past 15 years at this point. I started in the help desk and then found my way masochistically into SharePoint, where I did a bunch of SharePoint server and so, yeah, thank you. Did SharePoint for a while, purposely tried to get away from SharePoint, did Azure for a while, and then now I find actually in the AI space that I'm talking a lot about SharePoint again. So that's just a little bit about me.
David?
Yeah, thanks everybody. My name is Dave Kennedy. I'm the founder and chief hacking officer at Binary Defense and TrustedSec. When you run your own companies, you can come up with your own cool titles, which is awesome. But I've been in the security space for over 25 years. I was in the cyber warfare division of the NSA doing cyber warfare, breaking into other countries and things like that for a number of years. Had a top secret government clearance. Quick funny story about that. When I first joined the military, I thought if I got a top secret clearance, I could figure out whether or not we had UFOs or not. And that's the reason why I joined. I told my buddy Sean, who was my best man at my wedding, I'm like, hey, if I call you at like 2 o'clock in the morning and I say yes and I hang up, there's aliens. And I never made that call, unfortunately. Very compartmentalized. But I did 2 tours in Iraq, one in Afghanistan for intelligence-related missions. I worked with special forces going in and doing raids and things like that, collecting evidence and figuring out where the insurgencies and things like that were. I'm always on the news. I'm on Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, talking about anything cyber-related. So I'm usually in my office doing those. I helped out with the TV show Mr. Robot. So I worked with Rami Malek and Christian Slater and helped develop a lot of the stunts and skits. And Rami Malek actually used my name to social engineer somebody on one of the TV shows, which was pretty cool. I was in a Chris Brown rap video, believe it or not, as well. Don't Google it. It's like not safe for work at all. And a little bit about TrustedSec and Binary Defense. We have over 350 folks worldwide. We work with 4 of the Fortune 5, 70% of the Fortune 1000 companies out there. We were rated the #1 cybersecurity company in the world per Forrester, which is pretty cool this year. So beat out E&Y and Deloitte. No offense to those folks, they're great. And CrowdStrike and a lot of others out there. And then as far as AI goes, that's been my main area of focus for the past 5 years. My current project I'm working on is I built a large language model that trains our analysts on detecting unusual behavior, looking for intrusions and things like that within organizations. So I built a whole large language model and a whole artificial intelligence solution for our business over at Binary Defense and TrustedSec Consulting, Binary Defense on the security operations 24/7 monitoring side. But look forward to talking to everybody today about it.
Wait, before we move on, are there aliens?
I don't know. I think so, but I don't know. I can't confirm nor deny that. So,
Okay, all right, moving right along.
All right.
Drew, welcome.
Tough act to follow there, but Drew Koechley. I am an MD of Analytics Strategy at VML, which is part of WPP, and I will throw out just more and more acronyms as we go. It's one of the largest ad agencies in the world. So if you watched like the Super Bowl this year, we made like half of those ads. I do none of that. I'm on the back end.
man, I was like, man, he's got a cooler story than me.
And I'm like, I'm on the back end saying like, hey, do people actually respond to these? Are we getting people on the website from these? What's our traffic look like? The Harry Met Sally thing, that was actually from our agency this year. Also, so were Coke and Oreos, that weird combination that we did, that was a join from our agency, which I won't try. But I have a pretty eclectic career. I started out working in credit cards. Then I joined Signet Jewelers with a couple folks there in the back. I'll throw it out to Gary and Ian, if Ian's still here. And then I went back to school. I went to Carnegie Mellon for my MBA, did some consulting work, got really into loyalty programs, understanding customer retention, doing a lot of analytics strategy around that, modeling, forecasting. If you signed up for Chipotle's loyalty program in the first 2 years, I am the reason you did not get free guac. So sorry about that.
I hate
it
guac
did.
anyway, so.
There we go. It worked out.
I like it.
And then after a few years in consulting, I went to a late stage machine learning startup. Didn't work out. And now here I am at VML. I'm on one of the largest accounts that we have globally. And I'm the AI analytics lead for our product at that account. Our product is called WPP Open. It's actually a pretty robust product, but it uses a number of different things that are both proprietary. A lot of the content creation. So if you're thinking about like videos, I work in automotive. We take CAD drawings of the cars and we can actually put them through different scenes, like if it's driving through a city or driving through a countryside or mountains or beaches and that kind of stuff, and make it actually seem real, not, have an extra wheel or something like that. And then, so I get to do a lot of that stuff on like the sexy side of things, but I also am looking at the long-term analytics strategy of how we plug in data from all of our different vendors that we work with, the Googles of the world, Meta, and understand how that flows all the way through the purchase journey on the front end, and then also customer retention as well. I'll pass it on to you.
It's a hard act to follow. John Paganini here, and I'm up here with a lot of hats, I guess. One of them is the co-chair of the AI Center of Excellence, which we started in Northern Ohio about a year ago, and that's a collaboration of all the healthcare providers, really north of Akron and all the way out to Toledo with ProMedica, and a number of the universities in the area as well. And I'm hoping University of Akron joins that AI Center of Excellence. And also, on that note, I'd just like to say thank you to the University of Akron for their hospitality and really embracing this conference and the members of this conference. I really felt good about everybody this week. So just a round of applause. But there's a couple of comments I could make about the robots. And if you're thinking about the AI journey, AI started, does anybody know what year the term AI was coined? 1956. And it was a group of scientists from Dartmouth who said, they were looking at a computer and they said, I think this computer could simulate human intelligence. And here we are today. But at the same time, Mr. Robot, Robbie the Robot was introduced in the movie Forbidden Planet in the same year. So, there's a connection there, and aliens could walk amongst us, of course, who knows. So a lot has happened with this Northern Ohio Center of Excellence. We're doing a lot of things that are pretty exciting. Myself, I have a consulting company that has done a lot of systems integration in the healthcare institutions up north, and it is now moving into the AI space, of course, like anything else. But you mentioned driving cars, And I also have a kind of a side business of taking automotive photography and using AI and programming, actually Photoshop. You can actually replace the backgrounds with whatever you want. And it's pretty exciting. So taking lots of pictures of cars and then putting them on Route 66 or wherever their imagination takes them. So doing a lot of work in AI and actually teaching AI in photography as well.
Oh, thank you. Jeff?
Great, thanks, Sean. Name is Jeff Ozimek. I'm Managing Director for Modern Applications at NRI North America. This probably goes to the current Akron students. I had a very unique journey of how I got here. Really, when I graduated college, I started out in sales. Ironically, my background was in informational management systems. Then I found myself actually selling technical recruiting based on those roles that I was actually trying to obtain. Loved it because I love talking about technical things, and I love selling and building relationships. A few years later, I actually found myself at one of my clients called OE Connection. It was an automotive SaaS company here in Northeast Ohio. And years later, actually managing a large data practice there. I was there for about 12 years and then found myself actually here at NRI about 6 years ago as well. So especially those students who are graduating, you never know what the journey is going to take you. I think Brian mentioned flexibility, right? You just never know. Network, come to events like this. You just never know who you're going to meet. So, and best of luck to all of you. So NRI, we're actually a large IT consulting firm in North America here. I'm responsible for modern applications, which is pretty heavy, right? Modernizing applications can mean a lot. Anywhere from migrations, integrations, looking at applications, looking at mobile apps, and obviously AI is making things a lot easier and a lot harder for us as well. So look forward to hopefully sharing all of our stories as well, and thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just go right down the line, and I want a short of a response as possible. Starting with you, Matt, where do you see the top misconceptions or myths that are out there in the universe about AI? What is like the top few that you're hearing that you feel are just not true?
Yeah, so I kind of have two different things around that. The first is that I think that people feel like AI is really difficult or that it's really complex, and it certainly can be, right? I would liken it to development where, most people that code, if you code in this room, you're not thinking about how that compiles in the runtime down to the binary on the chip, right? Mm-hmm. You could go to that level with AI, but I think that the entry to AI is not as daunting as maybe it can sound. I'll liken it to Brian's slide with the million words that were on there, right? It can become complex, but you can get started and leverage it without having to go that far down. And I had an awesome second point around my misconception, but I just lost it.
All right, well, David, you're up.
I think the biggest challenge with AI right now is, one, keeping up with the trajectory of AI. We've kind of level set a little bit with some of the models that are coming out. But how do you use it within your organization, and does it actually give you cost savings, efficiency, and things like that within your current organization? I've been in the security industry for 25 years, and every year there's a brand new term in the cybersecurity industry that we all need to adopt, whether it's next generation or endpoint detection and response tools or things like that. And AI has a lot of promise in a lot of areas, but it also has a lot of shortfalls. Most specifically, training models and making models actually understand your organization's business process, the data coming in, the data coming out. That all becomes extremely important when you start to look at, integrating, artificial intelligence into your environment. And where I see most of these, I think there was a stat that came out from Stanford that something like 87% of all AI-based projects are failing right now. And that's largely because, you have to find very specific use cases, business processes that can integrate into and learn off of your company's behavior in order for that to actually be applicable to give you synergies and cost efficiencies and, things like that. So I think, while AI has a lot of promise, and it does, and even from a coding perspective, I'm a developer by trade. I've been developing for 30 years. Everything from assembly down to the chips themselves, to making my own boards, to all the way up to C, C++, and to more object-oriented programming languages like Python and C# and Java and Rust and Go and all those other ones out there. Vibe coding has revolutionized how fast I can actually code things, as long as I'm very selective of how I use it and for certain things that actually make sense for that to speed up my time to code. But you see enterprise applications being developed through vibe coding, and it's introduced we've seen over a 700% increase in security code vulnerabilities, production issues, things like that. So it has a long ways to go, but there's a lot of really cool things you can do with it today.
Yep, I completely agree with you. We have a lot of part of the reason our deployment doesn't go as fast is because of all the security and governance issues. One misconception, I think, is a lot of people think that AI leaders have it all figured out. I liken AI to being at a middle school dance where everybody's on either side of the room. There's a few people that went to the middle and they're like, am I doing this right? And they're awkwardly dancing. That's kind of where I think we are collectively across all of industry. So that's my just 2 cents, but that's kind of the way I view it. And it's exciting, but it's also kind of crazy at the same time
and
to
awkward.
be at the beginning of this. But you have to be okay with failure, and your leadership has to be okay with failure. And if you're not communicating that up, that's going to be a challenge for you longer term as well.
Yeah, well said. There's an old saying, to know success, you must know failure, but that doesn't mean you should go out there and try to fail, of course. And we should applaud University of Akron for having the vision and insight to actually stand in the middle of the room and actually put a AI certification program together. So congratulations for having that vision. But if we talk about the myths that are out there, of course, everybody's worried about their job, right? Is AI going to take my job? And AI is an assistant. It augments, it complements, it helps, it assists, and it is not going to take your job specifically. But you should, as well, of course, learn it, understand it, understand the value proposition that it offers, as Bobby did. And by the way, Bobby, I sent an email to Bobby Hancock, is still alive, and I didn't get a response yet. Okay, on that. But that is one of the aspects that AI, the big fear that it's going to take our jobs, and it's not. We're all sitting in this room. We all realize the importance of it and the value proposition, as you've experienced, Bobby, and told us so eloquently. There is something also called cognitive atrophy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it is the fear that AI is going to really dull the senses because it's doing so much work for us. But it's not. In fact, as we saw in the demonstration, how creative you had to be to design the BAIS prompt, if you will. So it really can force you and does help you grow in your creativity and using the tool itself. So.
Yeah, one of the larger challenges we're seeing, especially with our clients, is really defining ROI and efficiency. What does efficiency mean to them, right? It can mean a different thing. We're also going along the journey with them. What we're seeing is actually us investing in ourselves as a client comes to us with a complex issue. And I think that's a cool thing, right? And really having that partnership to go through the challenges, right? To understand why this thing is so darn hard to get in production. So we're looking at efficiencies to accelerate rather than getting in there. One of the examples, we actually had a client come to us actually looking to migrate off of MuleSoft. So we're also looking at different middlewares. They wanted to provide an AI solution to actually do it. And we said, well, what about getting a little more creative and saying, what if we use it to accelerate understanding where our endpoints are? That then also didn't us have to go to the CTO or CIO to say, here's the risk of putting something in production with that, right? But we were still using it on the back end to make things more efficient. But again, back to it, to your point, right? How do we define efficiency, for our employees, our resources, or the code as well?
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Jeff, moving back this way. And I think this was a good segue. On that project or any of the projects you've worked on, what were the top 1 or 2 key drivers that was really pushing these AI initiatives forward?
Yes. So number one is interesting enough is license costs. Right now, that is a massive thing for us right now. And if you look at any vendor, right, we're a vendor as well. Cost savings is important, but also companies are starting to see, keeping good employees engaged. For example, this company actually is trying to go away from MuleSoft because they want their team to own this and have pride. And they see it as actually a morale booster, which I think is very cool. The second part is a lot of our clients are also being told by their leadership, just figure something out with AI. So they come to us and we have really cool discussions, which is really neat. But again, we're helping them set their goals, for those initiatives they want, or other solutions or challenges might come up during that complexity. We'll work with our sales team a lot, saying, hey, I'm not looking for you guys to sell a mobile app, right? Let's have a solution sell and let's discuss what challenges are happening, whether it's with the business, product, or the technology piece. Yep.
Thank you. John?
I guess there's a couple of places we can go with that question, but when deploying IT solutions, and AI can be considered an IT solutions, there are some variances, especially when you think about the software development life cycle of a project, where AI introduces other factors. But a common process is to deploy an AI solution in what's called a shadow environment. That is, it's not being used by any users, it's completely harmless, and you're just testing it and making sure that it's doing what you want to do. And then you do a little pilot, and they call that a canary, the canary in a coal mine. And so we've got this pilot group testing the results, the output. Is it giving us what we want? And there's a lot of other aspects around, how did we get to even that point where we're testing the first one in the shadow scenario. But then when the canary phase is done, we then move it into production. And of course, after that, we need to strictly monitor that. And there's a lot of things that I guess we can talk about that a little bit later, about things to think about there. But those are 3 steps. Don't do it, just don't expose it to the users, small beta test, and then take it live.
So I think the 2 main use cases that we've found across the agency, and I work on one of the biggest accounts for the agency. We have over 1,000 people working on one account. Is we get something called a brief, which is basically a project plan that's at the beginning. I think something like 82% of our projects did not have a brief last year. We've created an agentic team that the user can go in, start having a conversation with it, ask questions back and forth, and then say, hey, here is your brief. This is how the project plan should work. Now have a conversation with all the people that need to be involved with that. So getting the problem structured on the front end has been something that's really been helpful for us. We've had it's beta tested for like the last 2.5 months or so. It's only about 15 or 20 users at my client, but it's a lot more streamlined. We're actually getting the paper that we need in our hand to get things moving. The other thing is, and back to your point about like employment and people being worried about that, our play that we're going to because we're always under cost pressure because we're an outside agency, is not so much that we're going to reduce headcount, but that we're going to actually be able to produce more with the same number of people. So like looking at like production costs of like how many pieces of creative can I get out there? There are tools out there called Dynamic Creative Optimization, DCO. We're testing one right now. It's going to go live next year, where we're going to be putting in offers and dynamically updating them by where people are and where they're buying cars, what backgrounds that the cars are in. So if you're in the West, you'll have a mountainous background. If you're in the Midwest, you might have corn in the background. But getting that kind of efficiency where we're not having a designer like actually have to go in and do this and then like, oh, well, for the Rockies, we have to do this and make sure that this legal disclosure is exactly this. We can pre-program all that in and then have it update based on where that user is and also what audience segmentation that they would be in as well.
Cybersecurity is an interesting one. Our challenge has always been the amount of data that we have to consume in order to identify, potential vulnerability or threat or breach within an organization. If you see in the news, all the ransomware events that are happening where companies are completely shut down by specific groups, usually out of Russia, or you see, nation state attacks with like China, North Korea that have, Iran, Russia that have, unlimited funding to breach organizations and companies. And if you look at statistics, most of the breaches that occur come from humans. They come from human error. So they get an email or a text message, they click the link, then from there the attackers have a foothold in their environment. And so when you look at behavior, it's very difficult to discern what's legitimate user behavior and then what's malicious user behavior. And one thing that AI has really helped us out with is that data problem. What we kind of went through, it was a kind of an evolution where we consumed all data, but it was just too much data for us to consume. So trying to find that needle in the haystack became a problem. Then we went to just look for the specific things in our environment that are known attack patterns. But then attackers got really creative and they figured out ways to, circumvent what that malicious behavior looks like. And so now we're back to this piece where AI can really solve a major problem for us, which is looking at large volumes of data and looking at behavioral aspects around that and their users to say, hey, is this malicious? Has this employee, in the past 5 months, started to transfer over a terabyte of data, in their environment? No, well, that's something suspicious we should start to look at, right? And so one of the things that I've been heavily focused on over the past 8 months is we have an internal tool called Night Beacon. And Night Beacon integrates into our analyst workflow. So we have analysts that have what are called, sorry for all the acronyms, but they have SOARs, which are security orchestration, automation, response tools. It's kind of think of it as like plumbing for all of your security tools and your monitoring devices, Azure AD and all that other stuff. It all comes into this central location. And then we have detections that pop up, and then our analysts have to look at those detections and say, hey, is this malicious or not based off of the data that I have? With AI, we can train those models based off of the analyst behavior and start to look for those predefined behavior patterns within an organization much faster than our humans can. So it's not saying that it's eliminating the human element of it. The humans still have to say, hey, is this malicious or not? But it bubbles it up much faster and we can respond much faster. And that's where you really get down to some breach statistics. The longer an attacker has in your environment, the more damage occurs in your environment themselves. They spread laterally, they get access to more systems, they can encrypt more things in your environment. So the faster that we can respond to these types of things and the faster that we can take action, we start getting into the agentic AI space of being able to automatically contain a host based off of the behavior that host is exhibiting, in a fraction of a second versus an analyst that might have, 10 customers are looking at, and it may take them 20 minutes to get to that specific alarm. It's cutting down the timeframes that we have to be able to respond to those specific threats. And it's continuously getting better over time based off of training off of our analyst behavior, whether something's a false positive, something that's not accurate or is not malicious, to something that's a true positive where, hey, something is actually happening here that we need to take action upon. It's creating that efficiencies there to allow us to respond much faster.
So I just want to make sure that I gotta be honest, going down at the end of the line, the question was, what challenges are we seeing getting AI deployed, right?
No, it is
Efficiencies.
Efficiencies.
Yes.
All right.
key drivers. Key drivers where in your line of work and the clients that you help, the people that you work with, where are you seeing as bubbling up as the key drivers of AI initiatives?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I think when we're talking to clients, like, and one of you said it earlier, it's like, what is our AI story, right? And
Yep.
so there's a lot of pressure, I think, at the board level to have an answer for AI. And one of the things I think that's interesting about that is you wouldn't have the same conversation around like, what is our answer for using a power drill versus a screwdriver, right? And so at the end of the day, when you have a business problem, it's either to increase revenue or reduce operational costs. And unless you're doing fundamentally one of those two things, you're really not solving a business problem. So it's just another tool in your toolkit to be able to achieve one of those things. So while we're talking about AI, and of course this is an AI conference, we try to flip the script of like, what business problem are we trying to solve, whether it's increasing revenue or decreasing costs? Can AI be a tool for that? Probably at this point. And then where does it fit in? Again, if we're trying to build a house, yes, you will use a screwdriver or a power drill at one point, but that's not really the conversation. So, if you're in the business of building houses, then how can we use AI to build more houses? How can we do it to streamline back office operations, which are not the thing that are building houses? And so I really think that we're trying to constantly encourage IT stakeholders to have that conversation rather than just doing something cool with AI.
How do you handle it when the C-level says, we need it, we have to have it, we're going to be left behind?
I'm a consultant, I'll give it to them. No, in all seriousness, I think that, pushback. I think if you have a CEO that is doing that, they're likely getting pressure from the board to have that answer. So of course, then it's the conversation of trying to help them find ways to use AI intelligently within their business. I think most companies at this point, at least with what we're seeing, is that reducing operational costs tends to be the go-to for where AI is being deployed. I think it's a little harder to figure out how to use that technology to increase revenue. But most of the time, and I think, John, you mentioned it earlier around displacing jobs. It's really displacing the mundane activities that none of us want to do anyway, so that we can do our jobs, which would be to either reduce costs or increase revenue, depending on where you're at in the organization.
Sure, and Matt, to build on that, once the C-suite says, I want AI, you present that business problem, and then you build the metrics. But then you need to establish that baseline. Now, where are we at right now, and where is AI going to take us? And then you do your ROI analysis after it's gone into production. But the thing to be concerned about or watch for is, let's say you're at 95% of operational efficiency or optimization, and you're only getting to 98 thanks to AI. Truly, was it worth the cost of running it and building it and maintaining it? And that's just something that has to be monitored, especially at the C-suite level. Are we getting the return on our investment? So if we think about the cost, if you will, or the value proposition or the ROI, the formula in a simple way is looking at the transaction itself. What is the transaction doing? Is it saving us time? Is it saving us money somehow? And we just multiply that one transaction by how many times it's actually being done, that one benefit. So if you've got that number, then you simply subtract what does it cost to build it, to run it, and maintain it, and you can look at an ROI evaluation from that perspective. And that's how you talk to leadership. Another way to talk to leadership is you tell a story. And you build a story around what the AI can do. I just went to a conference 2 days ago, and they had a whole panel talking about how do we present AI to leadership and have them understand the value proposition. And it was echoed over and over, there needs to be a story around what the AI is going to do for us.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I'm technically on like the revenue side of the equation, but I'm saying technically because I've looked at both the revenue side and the cost saving side. The revenue side, if any of you are like people who get sold to by B2B SaaS, is basically why you have like 10,000 extra emails from the guys out of undergrad that are trying to sell you software that they know nothing about. I used to manage that team. I've seen like 300 of those solutions. They're like, oh yeah, it just does this and auto generates this email, and it's like really creepy. And it doesn't actually, and it's bad messaging. Versus most of the stuff, even though we're revenue side generating on the marketing side, we're still looking at it more as a cost play right now, because it is really hard to say how much incremental revenue can we generate from this AI activity. Mm-hmm. So, yep.
Okay, switching gears real quickly. I'd like to ask each of you, where are you using AI in your daily life?
Thanks for letting me go first, and I'll forget the question again. So in terms of the daily life, I think somebody coined it differently, but internally at our company, we call it a cognitive offload. And truly, it can be a problem depending on the way you look at it. But my reliance at this point on AI is astounding. I actually don't know how I did my job without it in some respects, because it's unlocked so many things that, like, there might be a topic that in the IT realm that I just maybe don't know as much about, but now I can get ramped up on that information so much faster than I previously could, and kind of get the requisite knowledge that I need to accomplish the next task. We are starting to internally try to dog food the agentic workforce kind of narrative, right? In terms of having an agent that provides tasks for simple things, like one agent just simply doing invoice processing, one agent that's simply doing AP, et cetera, and starting to build that out, because we need to be spending more time with our clients, providing value to them and their businesses, not processing back office operations. So we, of course, POC and dog food as much as we can so that we can take those learnings to our clients and help them. So we're using it for that. We use it for the generative summary type stuff. We basically use it for code at this point. Of course, we have the human element of people that are senior developers that are overlooking it. But, there's not a day that goes by that within our company, we're not all using AI most of the day.
What flavor? Claude, ChatGPT?
So again, we're a Microsoft partner. I use Copilot once a month.
ChatGPT, but
Yeah,
Hey, they added Claude like
they did a
on
little
Tuesday.
bit. A little bit.
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I say that to say that Copilot itself as like a model is pretty awful. So we don't use it very much. And the reason, and I just want to be clear about that, I can't stand up here in good conscience and say that it does a great job. It has the best security settings. It has the best governance in an enterprise. So I still think enterprises are forced to use it. But we pay for the secure versions of Claude and ChatGPT and kind of dogfooded both of them over the past year. They're good for different things depending on what you're trying to do. I personally prefer Claude, but they're, kind of each one of those. And then sometimes offline models as well, just to see how those are doing. Things like the DeepSeeks, Llamas, et cetera.
Oh, yeah. David?
Yeah. So when you look at what was the question again? No, I was kidding. When you look at like how we're leveraging it, we leverage it very heavily both on the offensive and defensive side. So at TrustedSec, we have security consultants that try to break into organizations and figure out what their risks are so that you can plug those holes so that attackers can't get in, right? So, we work with some of the largest companies in the world. If anybody here has a smartphone, we work with those companies. We work with Microsoft. We work with pretty much everybody out there. And so security is a very important part of everything that they do. And so our level of expertise has to be top notch when we're going against some of the best, companies in the world. And so some of the areas on the offensive side that we've used is that generative AI is specifically using our own language models. We can train our models to look at what's the easiest path for us to get into an organization and company. So we can say, hey, comb this organization, comb this company. Here's our specific objectives. What are, go through and run these tools just to kind of get an understanding of their perimeter, what systems they have, what people in positions that we might want to target from a phishing or social engineering perspective. And then it'll actually help us do probability and predict analysis around, what's our highest probability of getting into this organization. And then from there, and you're actually starting to see a lot of adversaries leverages as well, where when we're getting access to a system, there are known pieces of code that you can run that will get detected pretty easily within an organization, right? And so you have to rewrite your code, you have to obfuscate it, encrypt it in certain ways so you can get around, endpoint detection and response tools or antivirus and things like that. And what AI allows us to do is dynamically generate malicious code instantaneously that's unique to every single endpoint or server that we're going after. So it'll actually create new code for us every single time we're running, which makes it near impossible to detect that those specific things are actually happening. So it's actually increased our chances of getting access to an organization and going undetected for a larger period of time, as it's doing for adversaries as well. On the detection standpoint, very similarly, we use it, to understand, hey, there's brand new code that we haven't seen before in the wild that's now being executed onto this machine. We need to look at this and investigate it to respond to it. But even for simple things, like one of the most painful processes that we have are security questionnaires. They're the worst. Every organization has a different questionnaire. The questions don't follow any type of standard format, and there's usually like 7,000 questions about your security program. So we work with these big companies. They obviously have a governance program. They want to make sure that any data that we collect or that we get is protected and stored. And so we've used AI to automate all of those questionnaire responses. So we just went back and had it learn off of all of our previous responses that we have. And then we have an automation workflow process that basically says, hey, we haven't seen this question before. It just pops it into Slack. We respond back to it. It retrains the model, and then it spits off the customer questionnaire to our customer within a few seconds. So it took, it used to take hours and hours and hours of people to have to go through those really rigorous security questionnaires, and now we're spitting them out in 30 seconds now. So we've gotten a lot of efficiency from those specific areas. As far as different models, we do a lot of work in the DoD space. So we do a lot of work for government agencies. That's all I can say, I guess. We do a lot of work for government agencies, and so we're not allowed to use specific types of models like DeepSeek or Quen or those types of ones that come from China specifically. So a lot of times, we're using, Olama or Llama, and other models that are more internal. I'm a huge fan of actually BERT. BERT Fast is awesome from bidirectional models and training, especially if you're trying to do like behavior analytics and stuff like that. It works well. For coding, we also use AI to code as well. So we've augmented our developers. There are a lot of leverage it, but there's a lot of governance around it. Like what tools are allowed to use? Are they allowed to use Cursor or Claude or Anthropic, or what other things are supposed to, specific guidelines. And then we also create rule sets. So you can tell AI how to code. You can say, hey, you need to follow this specific type of format, the structure, this architecture, leverage secure coding practices, server-side validation input. It needs to have appropriate test procedures and cases. So every time that before you ever make a change, you have to run test cases first to make sure that it's actually going to work. And it has to be very selective off of what we're doing. We're not allowing full enterprise applications to be developed at this point yet. There's too much bugs and code. And like if you build a vibe coded application, let's just say if I code a traditional application, it's 1,000 lines of code. It will be 200,000 lines of code in vibe coding. And it becomes very unmanageable very quickly from a code efficiency perspective. So you have to be very selective of how you're leveraging it within your organization. But Claude typically tends to be best. Grok has actually been outperforming Claude as of late with the latest model for coding specifically. So Grok is pretty good as well. ChatGPT is less on the coding, but more on the generative AI side is really good as well. So
I have a quick question. Can you explain to the group what vibe coding is?
Yeah. So vibe coding is, listen, it's literally just prompt-based coding, just like you would do for what's interesting now is anybody here, if you don't know how to code at all, you literally can code today. Like whatever you want, anything you want. You want to make a video game that has awesome graphics that you can play with your kids and it's multiplayer. You don't need to understand sockets. You don't need to understand TCP/IP. You don't need to understand anything. It'll develop it for you just by saying, hey, I want to build this game. This is what I want the game to look like. Here's how I want it to communicate. And it's all just normal human syntax. And then it will generate the code. And 99% of the time, it's actually going to work right out of the box. It's gotten that good. 6 months ago, it was a very different story. What are called hallucinations would occur quite often. It would rewrite sections of your code that you didn't want it to. It would write faulty code, bad code. Just in a 6-month time period, that's almost been completely alleviated. I wouldn't say completely alleviated, but almost completely alleviated. And you can develop full-fledged applications without even having to write your own line of code. I mean, you can build a website that looks absolutely astonishing. You can be like, hey, I want to go to this website, TrustedSec.com, and I want to make a site that looks just as cool as this for my company and make it look interactive, generate the images yourself, make it look as professional as possible. Here's my address, and it'll generate that website for you in like 4 minutes. And it'll be super awesome and it'll look amazing. So today's ability to code is literally just what's called prompt-based coding. So you just tell it the things that you want, the way you want it to look aesthetically or the way you want it to operate or work, and it'll code it for you. And you can be like, hey, I want it to be written in Python or C# or whatever you want to do, and I want it to be hosted here. It'll set up the account for you and build it for you and give you the API keys and do all that stuff automatically for you. Where it's created a lot of efficiency for me is we have to integrate into like 1,000 different security products. Like every company is completely unique. They have a different technology stack. One might be Cisco, one might be Palo Alto, one might be Microsoft, almost all Microsoft. And then you have all these cloud providers, right? And so we have to figure out integration strategies into all of these. And I can be like, hey, this new tool came out that this customer is using. Go to their SDKs and figure out their API structure and build me a connector for this that will put this information into this specific log format that I can go and automatically ingest, and it'll write that code for me. And now what used to take me 2 weeks or 3 weeks takes me 30 seconds. So it has definitely increased my ability to code substantially faster than I ever could. I just built that night beacon application I was talking about for artificial intelligence and automatic learning. It took me 3 weeks to write that. It would have taken me 6 months normally to be able to do that, right? So, I mean, it's the time to develop. And obviously I've had to make a lot of changes and build it out over time and expand it to production and all that good stuff. But I mean, to prototype, like you can prototype in minutes now, not days, weeks, months, et cetera. It's so fast.
Just to hop on the API thing. So we have a data platforms team that manages all of our connections with all of our different vendors for media and whatnot. And that team is actually quite small given the size and the amount of media spend that we have. But part of the reason why they can still stay so small is because what used to take them 2 or 3 weeks from an API and testing perspective, now takes them about 4 days. It's like 80 to 90% correct right off the bat on the API coding. But also just other daily life things. So I'm gonna actually go into my personal life a little bit. So I'm a huge fan of Perplexity. I'm geeky enough that I was in the first batch of people to get the new Comet web browser, and it was perfect timing because I came back from a week of vacation on the West Coast with my 3 small children. My dishwasher broke. So what did I do when I was jet lagged? I threw all the stuff in there and I'm like, it needs to be this size, this color. Where can I get it the fastest? Because I do not want to wash all these kids' dishes for the next month. And it spit it out in about 2.5 minutes. And I went back and I checked it the next day and it was spot on. That was basically everything I wanted. Other things that I've done that are just kind of goofy ones. We have a career coach, so if you built in our thing, but if you're frustrated, if you need somebody to talk to, that's been a good use case at work. I actually use that to help me write an email of I was kind of PO'd, and I wanted to not sound like an asshole like a week ago. And so I wrote the email, and then I was like, make this professional and not passive aggressive in the slightest, and it did it. So that's another good one. But I think my favorite use case that I've done, and we've even come a long way from that, is when the tariffs got announced on April 2nd, I was at my client's headquarters and they were like, well, shit, what are we gonna do to respond to this to try to sell as many vehicles as we can with discounted pricing? So they put together this whole ad campaign. I used the personas that we have of their customer base, built them into agents, and then we actually ran synthetic focus groups of, hey, this creative, which one do we think is going to perform the best? How does this resonate? Oh, that one seems really fake, and that showed up across all of your 3 main audience profiles. Do not use that creative because people think you're taking advantage of the situation. Is it actually totally accurate? No, but does it make you think in a different way? It certainly does. And that's probably been my favorite use case is hey, I actually can go put myself in somebody else's shoes and see what they're thinking opposed to just how I think about the world.
Yeah, one thing to hit on too, if anybody here is interested in getting into AI development, there's a free tool out there called Cursor. Now there's premium tiers and things like that, but if you go and download Cursor, it's cursor.ai. You literally get it works on Windows, works on Mac, works on Linux, and it literally just has a prompt there, and then just give it your text of what you want to build, and you'll see the code being written to your left-hand side. You don't even have to ever touch that code or even know what the code's even doing, and then you just hit run, and it will run. It's that easy to code nowadays. Downloading a tool. My kid, he's in a coding class right now, and he's using Java, which I'm not a fan of. I just not a fan, but. I'm a big Python guy in general, or C. But he had to do Java, and I had one of his classes, and I'm like, I haven't touched Java in 6 years. I mean, I understand the logic and everything, but I'm like, hey, solve this for me, and it solved the problem for me. And now then I taught him how to actually go and do it, based off of that. But now that he knows that I use that, he's using it all the time now, and he made this game that I don't necessarily approve of. It's like a first-person shooter game and everything. And then him and his brother and I are playing this game that he's now advancing on, and it's gotten pretty intense. It has different levels now, different maps. Of course, he has cheat codes that his brother doesn't have, and everything else, but he doesn't know about it. So he's coding these full-fledged first-person shooter games using Cursor to basically develop it. And he doesn't know a lick of coding. He knows a little bit of coding, but he can navigate himself around. But it's crazy what you can do with it now. And if anybody here hasn't experimented with it yet, just go and download it and just start prompt-based coding and run your stuff. It's really cool.
Well, one of the things, so when I used to work at PwC, and I think we were an investor in one of the RPA tools. UiPath, I think, was the one that we were in. And I don't know if any of you have ever used an RPA tool, but it is tediously awful, especially if you don't have a job that has any kind of repetition in it, where you're like, okay, do this, okay, blah, blah. When you do it with something like Cursor, it can literally be like, oh, okay, well, this box moved 10 pixels this way. I'm fine with that. I'll go do that anyway. And I know because that's what the box is supposed to look like. Versus RPA, if it's slightly off, it's like, job failed, you're toast, didn't work. Now you have to go back and run it while you need the resources to do your job during the day. So that's one of the things I love about something like Cursor.
Yeah, I used Java in Photoshop. One of the ways that I used it was when I'm replacing the background, I wanted to tell it exactly where the car should go in the scene. So I would have Photoshop actually stop and ask me, what pixel location do you want to put it in? And then it would do 100 different pictures after that. So I set it up to do that. So it was Java, but I didn't really have to know it, so it was good.
I don't think any less of you. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a good examples. I'm going to give a healthcare example of how AI is being used that may or may not be known to all of us. But it's very, very popular right now, and it's showing some great value. And that is ambient AI, if you've heard of that. And that is when you walk in and you have an encounter with your doctor. The doctor says, do you mind if I record our conversation? And you may be aware that in the past, and maybe that's still happening in some places, when you're having an encounter with the doctor, they might be on the computer. Oh, yeah, I see, okay, what else? And, they're typing away and tracking that. If you're lucky, maybe there's two people in the room. But what this is doing is you're having an eye-to-eye conversation with the doctor while you're discussing all the issues and concerns that you may have. And all of that's being recorded. And the doctor can really focus on asking the right questions and doing what they do as a clinician. When that is transcribed, it is then placed into the medical record in the right fields where it should go. So it's looking at this and saying, this is some of their family history. Over here, it should go in diagnosis. And so all of this information is being categorized correctly to really enhance that experience. And so a couple of benefits from that are, one, the patients are walking away with really good information after their encounter when they have what's called a patient visit summary, but they're also enjoying their experience with the doctors. On the other side, the clinicians are going home on time, and they have something that they call pajama time, where they had to actually sit at a computer after hours and type in all the notes from the day. So that is actually, we've heard doctors say that, I enjoy going to work now, I'm going home on time, more balance in my life. So those are some of the things that are happening. Other aspects of using AI, and I have a software program for snow and ice management and landscapers. And the first thing I did was about 2 years ago was build a chatbot, fed it all the FAQs, fed it all the documentation, and we've got 20 years of data. And all of that went into a chatbot, and now the user just says, well, how do I create an invoice, or how do I assign my crew to a location? And it gives them a really good context in that. We haven't eliminated the human, of course, but it is very self-sufficient from a user perspective. One other way that I'm using it personally is teaching AI in photography. I just gave a session, and what I like to do is create a board, a virtual board. And in this case, I created a virtual board of professional photographers like Annie Leibovitz and other photographers that are out there of all different areas, black and white. And then in the session, we actually entered a picture and into the judging panel, and we said, judges, what do you think of this picture? And each judge gave an opinion of the picture from their individual perspective. Annie Leibovitz likes the people side, another judge liked the black and white aspect of it. So this is really an interesting way to interact with AI. You create your own virtual board and then ask questions of it. It especially works well in business as well. So just the thought there on some uses of personal AI.
Yep. Yeah. For us, I think the speed of decision making has vastly increased. For us to actually do a proof of value, or hey, we have these three options with this amount of budget, it's helping us actually deliver the solution. Where just a year or two ago, it would take us multiple weeks, sprints, to actually prove those things out. So the quick decision making is actually helping our clients actually move forward a lot faster as well. So.
Okay, so starting with you, Jeff, what in your travels and in all the work that you've done, what in your mind are probably like the one or two keys to success that you think has really made, whether to scale up or you've scaled up and now you have to implement and drive that project enterprise-wide? What are some of the keys to success?
Yeah, I think things are moving so fast right now. We cannot lose sight of setting a strategy and plan. I think that is one of the things that, especially where We have so many ideas floating around. We can't lose those. We have to capture them. But we have to have a long-term vision. We have to have a medium and a short-term vision as well. But I think sometimes things are moving so fast, and even when we're implementing things, we're learning from day to day. But if you don't have that long-term vision and strategy to say, this is where either my business wants to go, where I want to grow my people and scale up, we can't lose sight of that, and we have to think forward, even though things are moving so fast and instant as well. So, yep.
And with regard to the speed of AI, I heard a saying last week, it was safety and velocity. So if you want to move fast and you don't consider the safety of the AI, there'll be challenges. But if you have safety, if you're really focused on safety and you don't have any velocity, then you may take a while to get there. So you have to find that balance. But one of the things that happened in the AI Center of Excellence, we formed it last year, was we, of course, asked all the committee members, what should we be working on? And the first thing that came out of that was we need to make sure we're doing governance and we have a framework around that. And so the concept of governance, and sometimes that's a complex term, is the data has to have an ownership. Who owns the data? Is it a person? Is it a team, a department? Ownership must be established. The quality of the data must be present as well as the ownership, and the retention of that data, the quality of it, and everything else. So governance is that, and the framework simply is wrapped around that, and it's the operationalization of the governance strategy that puts that into place. So the other areas that we worked on were health AI literacy. Health AI literacy is very important. Both the patients have to understand where and how AI is being used in their experiences with the healthcare institution, and the doctors have to be able to trust it. And one of the ways to do that is, of course, with watching the data. One aspect of the data is that eventually, if the data has been trained, and it was trained maybe geographically in a different place, but data changes over time. And so they have this process called the yellow alert. And the yellow alert says maybe on the fringes of the data that we were trained on, we're seeing some exceptions and we need to maybe recalibrate that data. But then it gets a little bit more serious, and there's a red alert, and that says, my goodness, we have to retrain the entire model with the data. And the worst case scenario is that it's a safety alert, especially in healthcare, and we just roll back, if possible, to a previous model. So that really has to be managed and maintained. And there's something, if you haven't heard of this yet, called a model card. And this model card is designed for the model. It tells you, what is the purpose of it? How is it used? What are some of the edges, if you will, of it? And it just lets you understand where the model is and what it's supposed to perform for you.
To kind of piggyback off that, there with the velocity component, there is a lot of unresolved legal issues with AI that are extremely complex, that we're like, every time we're like, oh yeah, we could do this, and then our legal team's like, well, so the example that I'll use is when we generate those car images that I was talking about earlier, we can't put people in them right now. And the reason that we can't put people in them is because both us as an agency and our client have a contract with the Screen Actors Guild. And we have not figured out a compensation model if we don't put actors in creative. So there's so much complexity to things like in terms of velocity of just like, hey, there's all these legal things, and that doesn't even come down to like who's liable, any of that kind of stuff. There's just like weird tangential things that are related to this as well. But I think for AI projects, and I think most projects in general, you have to have your objectives really clearly stated on the upfront of what you want to get done, and then you actually have to listen for feedback. The biggest challenge I've had thus far with AI feedback is like half the people want to give feedback and are like give almost too much feedback, and then the other half are like, yeah, I don't even know what the hell this thing is. I don't know how to give feedback. So then you sit down and you coach with them and you talk through it with them. But that has been a genuine challenge for me, is because it's not everybody is as technical as I have been in my career. And sometimes the fact that it's called AI kind of scares people off from giving that kind of feedback. And I'm like, no, treat it like it's a person. Treat it like you're giving somebody, career advice. And like, that's the kind of feedback that you should be thinking about when you're working with it.
If I can comment on that, one of the aspects of building a model is to also have a place where users can actually provide that feedback. So if you're in a healthcare institution and it says, here's what I think the diagnosis and the procedure should be, and the doctor really doesn't like what the output was, it should challenge that. And so you should have a culture, if you will, where you're allowed and enabled and encouraged, if you will, to challenge the output that the AI is generating. And that just only goes to really improve the model.
Yeah, what everybody was saying here on feedback, that is the most critical component of success if you're implementing AI, period. If the data that's coming into that isn't good data, your model's gonna suck. And it's not gonna work appropriately, and it's not gonna give you the efficiencies or synergies or the success that you're looking for. So if you're trying to embed a AI to be on AI just because you wanna have a market differentiator, cool beans. But when you look at what these models have to be able to do in order to train, it needs a lot of data, it needs a lot of feedback, and it needs to be continuously care and feeded upon to get those models to be somewhat accurate to where you need it to be within your organization or business process that you're actually going and implementing. There's a graph that someone posted on X one time, and it's so relevant. You know, when ChatGPT first came out, it was a revolutionary area, but it was really a proof of concept. We didn't know how that was going to impact the industry. It was just generative AI, right? You can type something in, it would spit you back some feedback. Interesting enough, do you know some of the largest growing areas right now in technology is social media companies, because they have partnerships now with Claude, with ChatGPT and everybody else to soak that data in so they can train their models off of specific data, off of user behavior. So it's literally just stealing our personal data, right? And it's using that to train the models better and be more efficient at, world political stuff, or advancements in technology, or analyzing scientific data research and being able to apply it. Something really interesting just happened recently. I believe it was Crohn's, but don't quote me on that. But they were able to use AI to do the DNA sequencing of a young individual, and it was the first time that they've actually been able to sequence the DNA and the issues with Crohn's and develop essentially a cure for Crohn's for I think that was like a 3-year-old. So the advancements in AI are huge right now, right? But we're in this kind of hype cycle right now where we don't really know where it fits and where it's going. And the advancement of AI is actually slowing down substantially because the models can only get so good before you get to something like AGI, artificial general intelligence, which we're still a very long ways from that. Sam Altman says it's gonna be like 6 months, but he said that 6 months ago, and then 6 months before that, and then 6 months before that, and then
What does Bobby Hancock say?
we're a long ways away from AGI, but
Yeah, I
long ways.
don't trust Sam Altman's.
No. It's always 6 months. It's kind of like when Elon Musk, when he says there's going to be an update for Tesla in a week, it's like 6 years down the road. But it happens that way. If you look at what most of us will experience in our lifetime, though, is the advancements that's happening right now with artificial intelligence and quantum computing is going to be the next evolution of the human race. I don't want to get too philosophical with it, but I don't know if you know this or not, but Cleveland Clinic has one of the largest quantum computers in the world, literally sitting here in Cleveland, Ohio. And when you look at quantum computing, it's a whole different way of computing. If you look at binary, right, ones and zeros, quantum computing is a completely different way of looking at calculating things at a much faster rate. Think of it as a maze, and a computer will literally try, every single path to get to, the end of that maze, whereas with qubits, it tries every combination of every single exit at the exact same time. And there was a major breakthrough that happened last year with Google. They were able to compute a number that would have taken with current computational space like 700 million years, and they were able to compute it in less than 5 minutes. Now, there's also some crazy theories on that too, where we couldn't use our current universe as computational theory, and it actually kind of theoretically proved the multiverse, but I won't get into aliens and stuff like that later on, but if we want to go into that, we can. But when you look at the pairing of what artificial intelligence can do with the emerging field of quantum computing, and we're getting pretty close to quantum computing within the next 20 years, it looks to be a very viable solution. Now you're starting to talk about the cure for aging, cure for cancer, cure for those things instantaneously, because they can try every single combination of a cure on your DNA instantaneously all at the same time versus having to do a spin every single time and wait, one day and wait another day. And then they try, 30,000 by the time you're 30 years old. They can try 10 billion within a fraction of a second instantaneously with quantum computing and AI. And now you're having individual cures for individual people. So we're in a really unique time space right now where that stuff's going to really become really important. And going on to the thing that John made earlier about not replacing your jobs, 100% agree with that. But you definitely want to be very in tune with what's going on with artificial intelligence in your jobs, because what's going to happen is if you don't know AI, you're not going to have that job. So yes, it will augment and help you out, but AI is a critical component now and will continue to be a critical component that everybody will need to know and understand, feedback loops, everything else that starts to change business processes within organizations to become more efficient. That's the current state and in the future.
I don't know if anyone wants to hear my answer, if you just want to hear about aliens. But, a couple things that when I think about like, okay, what are the keys to success, which by the way, I remember the answer this time. Fair question to me. Thank you. So if you have, like, what are the couple things that would successfully deploy AI within my organization? I would encourage you to take like an inverse thinking approach to that of how would I absolutely sabotage or not deploy AI successfully within the organization, and then just do the opposite of that. And the reason I say that is because it's so much easier to think about how to negatively do something like that, where we won't train our users on it. We won't try to understand how to govern it. We won't try different models. We will just kind of stick our head in the sand and continue doing things the way that we do. That I think is one where it starts to become fairly obvious. And then the other thing too is that I feel like there's this mystical nature around AI. And of course it is absolutely amazing and groundbreaking what it's doing, but it's another tool in your tool belt to solve solutions. And so, if we were up here talking about how would I deploy workflows in my organization, it would be a pretty dull answer in the sense that, well, you figure out processes that are being done manually, and then you automate them and you deploy that to production through your normal change processes, right? So I think there's still the fundamentals of people, process, technology, and where do we find those opportunities to deploy them? And still take the same approach, but you need to obviously understand how it works so that you can govern it properly. Mm-hmm. There are some small nuances, but at the end of the day, where most organizations are deploying it in those cost savings measures, it really is just enabling better workflow automation for that particular use case than the tools that are currently available. And so I think you take the same approach to deploying your organization that you would if it was any other tool.
Yeah. What's the cost of not implementing AI?
Right. Yeah. And it'd be the same thing as, a while ago I mentioned, I did a lot of SharePoint. SharePoint search was a pretty big deal for a lot of organizations in the sense that, we could grab all of our data and then basically do an internal Google. But you would be amazed at how many people don't know how to search properly, in the sense that there is syntax, there are nuances. Of course, you can just type some words, but if you understand how to okay, if I want to find something specifically on YouTube, site:/youtube.com when you do your Google search, those kind of things, that's what enables people to become efficient using the tools. And that's where, people need to still be at the center of the adoption of AI in terms of teaching them things like prompt engineering, teaching them things about what RAG means and what context means and what hallucinations mean. And we don't have to go into the nitty-gritty of how the LLM works, but teaching them how to use the tool effectively and what those guardrails are is going to be key.
So you would say collectively, all of you guys, that at the very least, AI literacy on a rudimentary level is a very big key to success?
100%.
Yeah. I won't hire anyone who isn't working on that at this point.
And think how fast this has changed, by the way. So 6 months ago, we had our customer advisory board for binary defense, and we asked them, hey, raise your hand if AI is a major strategy for you. Do your vendors need to have AI in it? And not one person raised their hand. Go back 4 weeks ago when we had our customer advisory board, and every single person raised their hand, right? So a lot of this is hype cycle, right? A lot of it is, a lot of vendors and what you're seeing on the innovation side of AI, everybody wants that, right? I will say AI will get substantially easier too over time as that technology gets more finite. Being able to spin up a model that's just for your company that automatically trains, via agents off of your workflows within your organizations and automatically populates the data, into those LLMs to be able to train off of your business process. That's all coming, and it is coming. But how fast that it has changed within a 6-month period, this is something that's here to stay for sure, and something that we all need to be very cognizant of.
Yeah, I think that another thing that I seem to hear a lot is because it's changing so fast, you can get into an analysis paralysis mode where it's like, oh, well, am I using the right one, or am I doing? And it's just one of those things where it's like you just got to get started, right? It's still going to provide an ROI, and I think you mentioned it earlier, John. Like, are we getting 95 or 98%? At that point, not using maybe the latest model, just get started with it in some fashion. Is going to unlock those efficiencies.
Great. Okay, I think we're going to open up the floor for questions. I think there's folks with microphones. Questions?
Hello, I'm Celia Kulch-Taylor. I'm with Quanix. I have a question for John. You had mentioned about governance and data domain owners, and how are you handling situations or clients that they're not really there mature? They don't have those policies or procedures or the governance in place or the frameworks in place. I think that's the biggest challenge that we're seeing today. You get this push from the CEOs and questions about it, but you hear this in the media, we're not ready for AI. And so how are you overcoming some of those challenges with your
Yeah,
clients?
good question. And who is really ready for AI? But certainly having an AI strategy at some level is important to the organization, and realizing the importance of the things that you mentioned, the governance, the literacy, those aspects of it are critical, having an architecture to support it. I'll give the example of Metro Health as one example of how they approached it. There is less risky projects that you can implement first. Instead of something dangerous that actually has a patient impact, you might look at claims denials, or why are my patients not showing up, and how can I build a model to help me do better in those areas? And so you test and trial on not harmless, but less risky areas as an organization. And you build your governance a long way. So a lot of organizations had governance in place for just their IT in general, for their data governance. And so now it's just bolted on the additional aspects that AI makes you consider.
I think there's also ways of inching yourself into it as well, right? Like for example, you mentioned earlier Copilot. A easy way to kind of get into the AI stuff is enabling Copilot very selectively across your business. So automation of meeting schedules, email crafting, things like that. Project management, those types of things that can be, still heavily governed by Copilot's management. They have the most robust security features that you can kind of place onto there, and how it stores data, what it can search, privileges and permissions and things like that. It's very easy to set up within an enterprise. So what I always recommend to a lot of customers that are looking to get into the AI space is, hey, just leverage Copilot internally for your Microsoft infrastructure, and then from there start to build upon that. When you start to see some synergies in areas that you start to get more advanced in, or teams, for example, that start to leverage it more and more and more, you might be able to augment them with better tools, because they naturally their business unit is much more successful with that type of technology in place. So it's inching your way in, to it, and Copilot's probably the easiest way to get into that.
Yeah, I think it's finding one quick win. We've gone through this task a couple times, which is, what is one manual task that drives you crazy, and can you automate it, right?
The one you don't want to
exactly.
do.
Yep, absolutely.
Hi. So when we come to these summits and we talk about these like responsible great uses for AI, it's kind of similar to that question. Just out there right now, what percentage of all these solutions do you think are following all these good procedures? Like, is this all beautiful world we live out there, or doomsayers, like nobody knows and nobody's protecting the data and all that? Like, where do you think we stand generally?
Yeah, I think the one, and a couple people have mentioned it too, like the number of failed AI implementations. I think there's a lot of hesitancy around that. So, there's a lot of people that are living in that POC world that really haven't pulled the trigger on deploying it into production for that exact reason you just asked, is that, there's a lot of misunderstandings about how the tools work, or not properly deploying them in the way that they are handling those concerns, those compliance questions, the security questions, the privacy questions, where that diligence isn't necessarily done if people are yeeting it into production, or vibe coding it into production, as you were mentioning earlier. So I think that's one reason why we're not seeing, like you mentioned, the hype cycle. There is that, and people may be using them in pockets, but I think that's one of the reasons we're not seeing that shift. And going back to Brian's talk, like the chasm, why that exists today is because there is just that uncertainty of the implications of deploying it to production.
I think if you look at heavily regulated companies that have already, going back to the previous question, good governance structures in place, right? I like to equate this to the cloud movement. When cloud first came out, every organization's like, we have to do cloud, we have to do cloud, we have to move all of our stuff to cloud because it's going to give us cost savings, it's going to be less complexity, it's going to be this, and none of that occurred, right? Introduce more complexity, introduce more cost. Now we're subscription models for everything, and But companies that did a good job with a governance structure around that about how they were going to leverage cloud infrastructure in their environment and have a good governance structure around that, how IT can use it, how you provision systems, how do you harden those systems, how do you ensure that the architecture is designed appropriately. It's a very similar case where you're hearing, if you look at pretty much every respondent here is that you have to have an already established good process in place. And then from there, look at where AI can help augment that, and that's where the success is created. I'll look at it from a secure coding practices, or one of the terms in the security industry is vulnerability management, okay? Vulnerability management is every computer, every server, every application that's custom coded or third party has vulnerabilities in it, all right? And we have to prioritize those vulnerabilities to figure out which ones are the highest risk for my organization and try to fix those vulnerabilities over time so that we can reduce the risk towards the organization, what our exploitable field is for attackers, right? Now, if you go to scan a large organization, let's just say a big bank, you're probably gonna see 10 million security vulnerabilities, okay? So 10 million security vulnerabilities sounds like a lot, right? But if they're prioritizing those right, that's good. But if they don't have a good process in place for when they build a new system, so before that goes into production, how do we architect this system to be secure? What dependencies do we have? What software is loaded on this? And you don't fix that root cause problem, then you're just going to continue to see those vulnerabilities increasing again over time. So you want to relate that back to the AI side. If you don't have a good process that's already in place, that is already working from an efficiency standpoint, then AI is not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. You have to have a good understanding around what you're trying to solve from an AI perspective to get that to be actually efficient.
Yeah, I just have a question on, are there cases when AI's got it wrong and they're illegal, or other
I'll take a
issues?
shot at that, and then you guys can play.
Probably the most legal one.
Well, one is AI did it is not an excuse legally, right? You can't blame the AI for the output it's generating, and legally, anyway. Go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that I'm working on with our AI product team is like trackability and traceability when you're giving when you're putting in prompts and you're getting things back and you're analyzing data. So one of the agentic teams that I built recently can basically take any reasonably sized spreadsheet and go analyze it and spit out, hey, this is what's going on. But I need to know, hey, what cell did you pull that from, or where are you pulling that context from? So if I get asked by the CMO of my client, hey, where did that come from? I can literally go back to that document and say, I found that here, and this is how this was done. I think that's going to be one of those components that really becomes important when you're working with AI, because otherwise you're going to say, well, yeah, AI did it. Well, that's a BS excuse, not just legally, but also like you took responsibility for the work and producing it. If you didn't fact check it, that's on you. So that's one of the other challenges with it too.
So about 2 weeks ago was the very first time I ever swore at my prompt for AI. And it was because I was developing something and there was a bug in the code, and I told it specifically what the bug was, and it would start to rewrite a different section of my code to try to fix a different bug. And then it would try to do the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over again until I finally started using some very explicit terms. And then it finally took me seriously. if you look at how
It's like
LLMs
4 times in though, when you
Yeah.
start. So I've only done it like twice, but like it's
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 times you have to swear at it.
Yeah, I had to
before
swear
it
like
fixes it.
I was at by like 6th or 7th at this point. It was not good. I was very upset. But at my AI model, it was very apologetic. It was like, I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. I was just trying to do it the easiest way. I'm going to make sure I fix this in the future for you. Very, very, very nice. Very, very, very. I wouldn't have responded that way if I was getting sworn at. But if you look at how large language models work, it's really at its basic core trying to predict the next next word in the sentence, right? And so, but it's basing that off of what it's been trained off of in its model. So if the data that you're putting into it isn't 100% accurate, it is prone for error, absolutely. And so you have to be very careful on having it do very complex tasks unless you have complex data that is accurate going into it, right? Mm-hmm. So, for things like automatically responding to customer questionnaires, hey, it's looking off of data that we've already submitted. The accuracy there is very good, right? It's a very simple response back. But if it's going through and coding, specific things off of applications, it's pulling data from Stack Overflow. It's pulling data from previously defined applications that it has access to source code from. And believe me, if you've ever been to Stack Overflow, it's not the coding examples you get there aren't necessarily the greatest. And so, it's data in versus data out. So you have to be really specific off of what you're actually trying to accomplish there.
If no questions, I can give one example of a study that was done in Israel. And it was a doctor plus AI versus AI. And the study was looking at the results, the patient outcomes. Who could do better, the doctor plus AI or just AI by itself? And they were looking at the results to see what would happen. So what is the obvious thoughts on who was better, the doctor plus AI or just AI?
Doctor
Trick
plus,
question, obviously, right? Yeah. So we would think and hope, because we love the fact that we have the human in the loop as the most important aspect, and we didn't really talk about that today, but that is critical. Always the human has to be present. Well, anyway, in this study, the AI had better outcomes than the human plus AI. And what might have been the reasons? Any thoughts on how and why that happened? And it's something that we were talking about here.
Yeah, let's ask Bobby.
Yeah.
Kind of bias.
Bias, yes. Indirectly it was the doctor's bias towards their own thoughts on what the outcomes or what the opinion should be and the recommendation. So the doctor themselves thought that they knew more than what the AI was generating in the end. Interesting exercise and experiment, if you will. But I think the reason I brought that up is because you've got to be able to trust the AI. So all the project management going into this, with the governance and the project strategy around that, and making sure that the models were trained correctly, tested properly, all of that has to, in the end, in the healthcare, when the clinicians are looking at the output, they've got to be able to trust that what they're seeing was accurate. And that's why, of course, that feedback loop is also important. So just thought I'd share that interesting experiment, and it's really kind of eye-opening about, what area we are in time. As you mentioned, the epic period that we're in with AI. We're in this transition period where we have to deal with the unknown and the unpredictability sometimes of what AI is generating. So it's just a cautionary tale there.
Okay, we have a question over here.
So I'm a student here at the University of Akron, and as many of us are getting ready to either graduate or look at jobs, many of us are, we notice that there's more AI used in businesses, and one of the questions I and many students have is, what do we need to know about AI? As in, what tools do we need, or what level of knowledge do we need to be competitive once we graduate?
Yeah, I can just talk about even hiring within our own company. We hope that when we ask about the use of AI, that the answer is yes at this point, because it is that next frontier that's coming. So if you're hiring the next generation into your company, you want them to bring the next generation of tools in as well. In terms of things that we specifically look for graduate level students, would be kind of what we talked about earlier, of just some of the basics around the terminology of AI. So I would make sure that you understand what RAG is, what MCP is, what hallucinations are, what contexts are. I think there's probably a few others, but I think those are like the really 4 important ones. Having a decent understanding of what the LLM is doing or what LLM means, how the models come to be and how they're trained, that's probably a good cursory overview just to be able to then have that understanding and context around how AI works so that you can use it responsibly. And just one other kind of tangential thing, going back to the other question I want to mention.
UFOs, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, no, just kidding.
it's absolutely aliens. There was a question earlier, and it made me think of the show Suits. If anybody's seen the show,
Such a good
Suits.
show. Oh yeah, love that show.
So the Mike, I think is the guy,
Mike.
right?
Yeah.
Mike, he's extremely knowledgeable. He's passed the bar, but he's uncredentialed. And
Photographic
Harvey
memory.
brings him into the organization. Harvey's still the one that's responsible for him. So in this analogy, Mike is the AI, right? And Mike can be wrong sometimes, but it's Harvey's job to make sure that Mike does what he's supposed to do. And I think that's a good analogy for bringing AI into your company.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'll hit on it. I think it's industry dependent. If you're looking at getting into, like, let's just say a computer science degree or development, web development, application development, IT security, things like that, you have to go down a bit lower to that. So how do the LLMs actually work? How can you build your own LLMs? How do you train models? How do you code in that area? How do you do vibe coding? How do you build that? How do you build agents that can do automation workflow for you in your IT infrastructure? Leveraging MCP as an example is kind of a data broker for how AI talks to other applications or pulls data back into systems and things like that. So looking at newer degrees that are coming out, college courses is very important for them to start to adopt this very quickly. And as we know, college courses, and this is not a negative, it generally lag behind a little bit on the latest amount of information and technology that's coming out. And because AI has been so fast and so immersive, making sure that you're staying within that level of knowledge, whether it's through the school that has a great program, or through online courses or things that can teach you. There's a lot of great online resources. NVIDIA just released one of the largest free AI training programs. They're trying to train the next generation of their processors. So NVIDIA being the largest AI GPU processor in the world. That's where all the data centers are built off of. All of the new AI stuff that's coming out, it's all Tesla GPUs. I'm sorry, not Tesla GPUs, NVIDIA GPUs. Well, Tesla's a big part of that too. But when you look at
that was a
that,
Freudian slip.
yeah, having a good understanding around how that technology works, how you can build your own, how you can leverage it, will make you a huge asset going into a company wanting to learn it, because the skill shortage now is there already within 6 months. So they have a skill shortage of people that can actually leverage AI in a development lifecycle or an IT infrastructure to automate workflow. That's a huge benefit for you going into your college career or growing into your first career path.
So I used to do an immense amount of recruiting when I was at PwC. So I did it both at the MBA level and also at the undergraduate level. So I think my stat was, like, when I was at PwC, I looked at over 10,000 resumes, which now I would happily automate with AI. The thing that I always look for when I'm having a conversation with someone is not necessarily specific skills, as much it is a curiosity and an interest in
100%.
actually trying to figure out
100%.
what they're interviewing for. Because if that person shows zero interest or does not ask questions, I know that I can't go throw them in the deep end because they're not going to swim up from the bottom.
Spot on.
So there's a book for some of the undergraduates out there. I think it's called The More Beautiful Question. It's a really good primer for how you think about interacting with other people, especially in the workplace, of like, hey, how do I ask follow-up questions? How do I think about this? And always, when you're new in your career, don't show up without a perspective. Like, you need to come into, and you can be flat out wrong. Like, I don't care if you come to me with, like, what might be the worst idea I've ever heard, but if you came to me and you thought about it and you're like, hey, this was my thinking around this, that shows me that you're at least engaging your brain. And then when I give you coaching, you're going to learn from it. Those are the fundamental things for me. I can work with anybody that can do that if they're interested.
That's great advice, Drew. Definitely. We shouldn't ignore, of course, understanding data and having some data literacy, Excel, of course, and SQL and things like that. And you should also think about the fact that you need to know prompting. And so the more you start using it, the quicker, the better, the more comfortable you're going to get with it, and the more power that you'll feel with it and be able to generate good response. But I mentioned it at the very beginning, and it's the importance of being able to tell a story that I just firmly believe that is the power of being an employee using AI. And thanks to AI, I can now tell a great story about something, whatever that is. Maybe it's the idea, whether it's wrong or right, it's still a good story. So
The other thing is too, so part of the reason why I like analytics so much is because I get to take data, which I'm curious about, and go tell a story. If storytelling's not like your natural state, that's what AI is really good at, both helping form how you tell the story, but also coaching you on how to talk through it. So you can go on Perplexity, you can record it and say like, hey, what point did that get across? Did I achieve XYZ thing? And you can have a whole conversation with it and get that feedback before.
Yep.
Like before you go into the meeting. And that's one of those things that like I think is vastly underrated. I've used it a few times of, am I gonna get what I need to across in this 10 minutes I have with this executive of my client?
Notebook LM didn't come up in conversation today,
It's
but that is a
fantastic.
fantastic tool for research.
And also the audio, I've tried the video summaries lately. They're actually pretty good, but if you're like really interested in academic studies like I am, but don't have any time to read them, you can pull them in, drag, and then actually create a podcast. I drive a lot to Detroit. I listen to like 6 of those different papers, and like they're 10 to 20 minutes, but it's literally a conversation between 2 talking heads that are AI that explains the entire paper to me. And then I can go back to it later and say, hey, like what questions do I have, and look at the mind map. It's phenomenal.
In fact, they're having a new feature where it can be interactive. You can
Yeah.
actually talk to the
Yes.
podcasters.
I have not tried it yet, but I've heard it's awesome.
All right, guys, we've got one more question, 2 minutes left. So this gentleman over here.
Hi, yeah, my question was actually for John. I was reading that same article that if AI can diagnose patients, what are doctors for? Which I think includes the study that you were talking about where patients and doctors and their AI augmented workflows. That article also includes information about how poison control is at an all-time low as far as customer engagement, but critical poisonings are at an all-time high. Possibly correlated to AI misuse in typical workflows. With that in mind, when you guys are meeting and providing AI solutions to clients, how important is it to tell them how wrong they can be in these solutions and exactly how wrong they can get it?
I have no answer to that. I think this is the promise, if you will, of IT/AI, and that is all these years. And I worked on the IBM Watson project back in that was 2010-ish at the clinic, and that project opened my eyes. I'm going to try to get to that question, although I don't really have a great answer for that, but. When you think about extracting data, giving it to an engine, and it coming back with its opinion on the diagnosis, which is what AI is doing now, or whatever the magic is there, then that is arming the clinician with amazing aspects of information that you cannot, in your head, correlate all the time. Even the best. And I think I heard a statistic about how much medical knowledge is doubling, and it was every 75 days, medical knowledge doubles. There is no human on the planet that can have that information easily in their head, right? So it's not possible. So the AI tool for me is an amazing invention that is now enabling the doctors to get better and better. And in fact, the co-chair of the Center of Excellence was working on DNA. So imagine all that DNA information, as you were bringing up before, being part of the medical record. And now we're bringing in social determinants of health, like where you live. So this is just arming the healthcare industry with the best information that they can have at any given moment, and it continues to get better, as you were saying, all the time. So it's not going to replace the doctors, but it's just going to give them better information to make the best decisions that they can to save lives. And I'm sorry if that wasn't the answer you were looking for, sir.
Okay, thank you, panel. I think you guys have been wonderful. This has been great. And I really appreciate you guys coming out today.